The lights have gone out on the stage now. Only a single microphone stands under a dim amber glow, the kind of light that once caught her face just before the applause began. You might not remember her name right away, but you remember that voice, calm, commanding, unforgettable. She could play the stern Mrs. Barrett in Lean on Me, the woman who went toe-to-toe with Joe Clark. And she could just as easily become the Chief, the warm, witty guide who made millions of kids around the world fall in love with geography on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. But who was the woman behind those roles? And why did Hollywood never give her the flowers she deserved while she was still here? Let's get into her story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Before the lights of Broadway ever touched her, there was a quiet street in Joliet, Illinois, where a young girl named Lynn Thigpen dreamed of ordinary things, drawing, reading, and the simple rhythm of a Midwestern childhood. Born on the 22nd of December 1948, she was one of 3 daughters in a close, working-class family who valued honesty, hard work, and kindness over attention or applause. As a child, she had no dreams of standing on a stage. Acting wasn't even in her imagination. Her world was school books, sketch pads, and the warm hum of community life. She later said she never saw herself as an actress. She just wanted to make sense of the world around her. But somewhere between the school hallways and church gatherings, a teacher saw something different. Her high school English teacher, the kind who changed lives, quietly told her she could do anything if she believed in it. That small act of faith would echo for decades. It was the first spark of confidence in a girl who didn't yet know she had a voice powerful enough to fill a theater. In high school, Lynn began to explore her curiosity. She joined the theater club, debate club, and the a cappella choir, not because she sought fame, but because she loved expression in all its forms. She was articulate, thoughtful, and funny, the kind of student teachers remembered long after graduation. And there was another gift, her voice, deep, rich, and filled with emotion. She could sing in a way that made people stop and listen. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Illinois, majoring in English and speech. Her plan was steady and simple: to teach, to help others find their voices the way her teacher once helped her. For a time, she did exactly that, a young English teacher, shaping young minds by day, sneaking into theater rehearsals at night. But the stage kept calling her back. The smell of dust, the creak of wooden floors, the sound of lines being rehearsed, it stirred something inside her. She began to study acting and dance seriously, eventually earning a scholarship that changed everything. After one semester, Lynn made a decision that would alter the course of her life. She packed her bags and left Illinois for New York City in 1971, a time when Broadway was alive with energy but still harsh to women of color seeking a place on stage. The city was loud, unpredictable, and unforgiving. She took a job waiting tables, sometimes wondering if she had made a mistake. But even through the exhaustion, there was a quiet certainty in her heart she belonged to the world of performance. Then, only 3 months after her arrival, opportunity found her. A new musical called Godspell was looking for a cast that could sing, act, and move with heart. Lynn auditioned, not knowing this moment would define her. When she stepped on that stage for the first time, surrounded by bright lights and the hum of an audience waiting to be moved, something shifted. The shy teacher from Joliet was gone. In her place stood an actress. And just like that, the journey began. Before the fame, before the lights, there was just a dream, and someone brave enough to chase it. New York in the early 70s was no place for the faint-hearted. The streets buzzed with the sound of ambition, taxi horns, laughter, and dreams colliding in crowded diners. For Lynn Thigpen, every day began with a tray in her hand and a hope in her chest. She waited tables, counted tips, and held on to the thought that maybe, just maybe, the city would see her the way she saw herself, as someone meant to tell stories. Her big break came faster than she expected. A stage production called Godspell was holding open auditions. It was bold, spiritual, and full of color, a perfect match for her grounded energy. When she walked in, she didn't have the polished confidence of Broadway veterans, but her voice carried a truth that couldn't be ignored. She got the part. For 2 years, Lynn poured herself into Godspell. The show became a cultural phenomenon, part gospel, part rock, all heart. She would later appear in the 1973 film adaptation, a milestone for a newcomer who had once been grading essays instead of reading scripts. The joy of performing live, of hearing the audience respond, became her oxygen. But when the show's success started to define her, she did something unexpected. She walked away. Lynn didn't want to be known for just one role or one kind of performance. She wanted range, depth, honesty. That decision to leave security for growth would become a pattern in her life. After Godspell, she began picking up roles in plays that challenged both her and her audience. The Magic Show, The Night That Made America Famous, and Working. She was quietly building a resume of substance, not fame. The late 1970 brought new momentum. In 1979, she appeared in the cult classic The Warriors, playing a late-night radio DJ whose smooth, haunting voice guided the story. It was a small role, but unforgettable. That voice, smoky and magnetic, made audiences feel she was speaking directly to them. Many never forgot it. That same year, she appeared in But Never Jam Today, continuing to refine her craft. The next year, she landed on Broadway in Tintypes, a nostalgic musical that celebrated early American music. The performance earned her a Tony nomination, the kind of recognition that told the world she wasn't just another actress from the chorus line. She was a performer who demanded to be seen. That nomination changed everything. For the first time, Lynn didn't have to chase opportunities, they began to find her. Casting directors called, scripts arrived, and Hollywood began to whisper her name. Yet even with this new attention, she remained humble. She gave up singing professionally to focus on acting, saying that every word on stage meant more to her than a note in a song. By the early 1980s, she began to cross over into film and television, appearing in Tootsie, 1982, a movie that would go on to earn more than $240 million worldwide. It wasn't her film, but she left her mark. Whether she had 3 lines or 30, she always carried the same quiet power. Lynn Thigpen's rise wasn't built on spectacle. It was built on craft, night after night of showing up, giving more than what was asked, and never pretending to be anyone but herself. In a city that often rewarded loudness, she found her strength in subtlety, and that, more than anything, made her unforgettable. After years of steady work, Lynn Thigpen's face began to appear in places that once felt out of reach. The television glow that used to feel distant was now her world. She wasn't the kind of actress to dominate magazine covers, but her performances began to speak louder than fame ever could. The early 1980 opened doors that once seemed locked. After Tootsie, she found herself moving between stage and screen with quiet confidence. In 1985, she appeared in Gimme a Break as Nell Carter's sister, a brief but memorable appearance that showed how easily she could blend humor and sincerity. Viewers loved her warmth, her ability to make even small roles feel lived in. 2 years later, she appeared in The Equalizer, a show that demanded emotional realism and grit. It was the kind of role where her subtlety mattered, no grand gestures, no exaggeration, just truth. That same honesty defined her stage work too. In Fences, she earned a Los Angeles Drama Critics Award nomination for a performance that felt more like confession than acting. Lynn's gift wasn't in pretending, it was in revealing. Then came 1989, the year everything changed. She was cast as Leona Barrett in the film Lean on Me, opposite Morgan Freeman. It was a story about authority, discipline, and redemption, and her character became one of the film's most unforgettable figures. Mrs. Barrett, the determined parent fighting Joe Clark's controversial methods, was stern and unrelenting. But Lynn played her with empathy beneath the steel. You didn't hate her, you understood her. For many viewers, that's when they truly saw her. In a movie full of powerful performances, Lynn Thigpen stood out without demanding the spotlight. The same people who loved to cheer for Joe Clark found themselves respecting the woman who dared to question him. It was a performance that spoke to the complexities of power, motherhood, and moral conviction, themes rarely written with such honesty for Black women on screen at the time. The success of Lean on Me brought her recognition and a surge of opportunities. That same year, she co-starred with James Avery in the NBC sitcom FM. Though the series was short-lived, it became a quiet favorite for its warmth and clever writing. Hollywood started to take her more seriously, but Lynn was never seduced by fame. She stayed grounded, often reminding friends that she was still the same woman who used to wait tables between auditions. In 1991, she landed what would become her most iconic role, the chief in Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. At first, she wasn't sure she wanted it. A children's game show didn't seem like the right fit for a Tony-nominated actress. But when producers told her she could shape the role from scratch, she agreed and created something timeless. The chief became more than a character. She was a teacher, a mentor, a symbol of intelligence and authority, especially for children of color who had rarely seen someone like her leading with humor and command. Kids shouted, "Chief!" when they saw her in public, and she always smiled. That voice, that spark, that quiet grace, she made education feel exciting. The role earned her 3 Daytime Emmy nominations and the admiration of an entire generation. But beyond awards, Carmen Sandiego gave her something more meaningful: connection. She had become part of childhood memories across America, the kind that would outlive the show itself. By the early 90s, Lynn Thigpen was no longer just a working actress. She was a face, a presence, a steady reminder that greatness doesn't always come with headlines. Her turning point wasn't about sudden fame. It was about recognition finally being seen for what she had always been: a woman of immense talent, quiet strength, and enduring grace. By the early 1990s, Lynn Thigpen had become a fixture in American entertainment, not through glamour or scandal, but through quiet mastery. She was everywhere and nowhere at once, a familiar face whose name people couldn't always place. That, in many ways, became her signature, the woman who made every story better simply by being in it. Her work on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego turned her into an icon for a new generation. While the show's concept was playful, Lynn brought a kind of authority that made learning feel noble. Wearing her signature red blazer, standing behind the desk as the chief, she delivered lines with rhythm and wit, part teacher, part comedian, part commander. Children who watched her weren't just entertained, they were inspired. For many, she was the first black woman they ever saw in a position of leadership on television. That mattered. The show became a phenomenon, running for years, earning multiple awards and even shaping educational programming for a decade. But to Lynn, the greatest reward wasn't the recognition. It was the letters from kids who said she made them feel smart, seen, and proud of who they were. At the same time, Lynn was continuing to build a remarkable portfolio across film and television. She appeared in L.A. Law and All My Children, showing her range from courtroom drama to soap opera depth. Her performance in All My Children as Grace Kiefer, a role she played throughout the 1990, earned her an NAACP Image Award nomination and reminded audiences that her strength wasn't limited to one genre. Off-screen, she was just as grounded. Colleagues described her as generous, private, and deeply thoughtful. She wasn't interested in celebrity. She was interested in truth. While others chased attention, she chased authenticity in her craft, her relationships, her presence. In 1997, Lynn achieved what many actors spend their entire lives pursuing. She won a Tony Award for Best Featured Actress for her role in An American Daughter. It was a moment of vindication, a quiet triumph decades in the making. The same woman who once waited tables in New York now stood on Broadway's grandest stage, her name echoing in applause. Yet even in victory, she remained humble. When asked about her success, she simply said, "I've been lucky to do what I love, and that's enough." That year, she also voiced Luna, the moon, in the beloved children's series Bear in the Big Blue House. Her voice became a comforting lullaby for millions of children, gentle, wise, and warm. She was everywhere again, shaping imaginations in ways that only timeless performers can. By the late 90s, Lynn had entered a remarkable rhythm. She starred in The Insider with Al Pacino and Russell Crowe, Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, and later in Shaft alongside Samuel L. Jackson. Each role was a testament to her versatility from stage to television to film. She carried herself with quiet dignity and purpose. And yet, despite working beside Hollywood's biggest names, she never seemed to chase the spotlight. There was no entourage, no headlines, no spectacle, just a woman who loved her craft and let the work speak for itself. In an industry that often measures worth by visibility, Lynn Thigpen built her legacy in silence, the kind of success that lingers long after the applause fades. For a moment, it seemed like she had everything: respect, fulfillment, and peace. But even at the height of her triumph, there were shadows forming just beyond the light. Fame, for Lynn Thigpen, never came with the noise it brings to others. She was admired, respected, even beloved but never quite celebrated. The irony was painful in its quietness. At the moment when she had finally achieved everything she once dreamed of, the world still didn't seem to know her name. Hollywood was full of faces that came and went with the tides of popularity. But Lynn didn't fit that rhythm. She wasn't a headline or a scandal. She didn't play the game of red carpets and interviews. She worked, she disappeared, and she returned always on her own terms. Those who knew her said she carried herself with an almost monastic focus. No flash, no vanity, no hunger for attention. Her joy came from rehearsal rooms, from scripts marked in pencil, from the exchange of silence between actors who trusted each other. She once told a friend, "The work is the reward." But in a city obsessed with visibility, invisibility can be cruel. The same humility that made her so grounded also made her easy to overlook. Casting directors praised her but often gave her supporting roles. Critics admired her but rarely wrote her name in bold. It wasn't malice, it was the way the system worked, quietly favoring the loudest voices. In interviews, she brushed it off. "I've always been lucky," she would say, as if gratitude could mask the truth that even with a Tony, even with decades of work, she was still fighting to be seen. Yet her integrity never wavered. She chose roles that mattered, stories that spoke to something human. She preferred depth over fame, truth over comfort. When others moved to Los Angeles to chase exposure, she stayed close to New York theater, the only place where she said she could still hear herself think. By the late 1990s, her filmography read like a mosaic of American cinema: The Insider, Bicentennial Man, Shaft, alongside small television roles that carried her unmistakable grace. She had reached a point where she could act beside legends and never look out of place. Still, Hollywood's affection was transactional. For every role she earned, there were a dozen she never got offered. Behind the success, there was also fatigue not from age, but from the quiet loneliness of a career spent in the margins of brilliance. Friends said she lived simply, often arriving on set in an old rental car, smiling as if the world were still new. She had no entourage stories, just the calm presence of someone who knew what mattered. Lynn never married, never had children, and never apologized for it. She once said she didn't need titles to feel complete. Her life, she believed, was already filled with music, with friends, with art that outlived applause. It's hard to pinpoint when the shadows began to lengthen. Maybe it was in those long, quiet moments between projects. Maybe it was in the subtle way Hollywood moves on, leaving even its brightest lights behind. What's certain is that by the time the 2000s began, Lynn Thigpen had become something rare, a master at her craft who had outgrown the very system that overlooked her. She was respected, yes, but not revered, remembered, but never recognized in full. And yet, through all of it, she remained unshaken. For Lynn, legacy was never about fame. It was about honesty, about doing the work well, even if no one was watching. When the applause faded and the stage went dark, she stayed standing alone, but radiant. By the early 2000s, Lynn Thigpen was living a life most actors would envy, respected, steady, and still working. She had found her rhythm in The District, a CBS crime drama where she played Ella Mae Farmer, a strong, compassionate leader set against Washington, D.C.'s political backdrop. It was the kind of role she had always wanted: intelligent, grounded, human. The show was a success. Viewers loved her presence, the calm in a world of chaos. On set, she was known for her professionalism, her laughter, and her warmth. Crew members said she made everyone feel seen, from camera operators to guest stars. But behind that smile, small shadows were beginning to form. She had started complaining about headaches, nothing too alarming at first, just a dull pressure that came and went. Friends told her to rest, but Lynn wasn't the kind to slow down. She'd been working her whole life. Stopping felt unnatural. She told colleagues she'd get checked out soon. On the 11th of March, 2003, she went to a doctor and had an MRI. The results didn't show anything alarming, and she returned to set as usual, cheerful and ready to film. The next day, everything changed. That afternoon, her friend found her unconscious at her Los Angeles home. The call went out quickly: 911, the hospital, the studio. But by the time help arrived, it was too late. Lynn Thigpen had passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage that led to cardiac failure. She was 54 years old. The news spread quietly at first, a few phone calls, a few messages. Then disbelief turned into grief. For many of her colleagues, it didn't seem possible. She had been fine just yesterday. She was supposed to be on set that week. The world of television lost one of its quiet pillars. And yet, outside the industry, her death barely made headlines. Those who knew her best remembered how full of life she had been in her final days. She wasn't sick. She wasn't fading. She was thriving, reading scripts, planning new projects, laughing between takes. Her sudden passing felt cruelly ironic, a reminder that even the brightest lives can be extinguished in silence. At CBS, the cast and crew of The District were devastated. The showrunners said the loss was like losing the heart of the family. In her honor, they halted filming for days. On set, her dressing room stayed untouched. For a woman who spent her life making others feel seen, it was as if the universe had stolen her presence too soon. She had survived decades in an industry that often forgets its own, only for life itself to forget her in an instant. The tragedy wasn't just in her death, it was in how unfinished her story felt. When the news of Lynn Thigpen's death reached the set of The District, silence filled the air. The crew stood still. The laughter that usually echoed through the soundstage vanished. People cried openly, not as actors, not as professionals, but as friends who had just lost someone they deeply loved. The producers faced a difficult decision. How do you move forward when the heart of your story is gone? Rather than write her off quietly, they chose something brave. They let her character die the way she did in real life. It wasn't for drama. It was for truth. They wanted the audience to feel what they had felt, the sudden shock, the disbelief, the ache that never fully fades. When the episode aired, viewers could see it, the grief was real. There were no rehearsed tears, no forced emotion. Every actor on that set was mourning a friend, and every viewer watching could feel it. It was one of television's most authentic goodbyes, and even now, it remains painful to watch. Her passing resonated far beyond Hollywood. Teachers, fans, and parents who had once known her as the Chief began posting messages, writing letters, and sharing memories online. Many said the same thing. She was part of my childhood. For a generation who had grown up hearing her voice command both humor and authority, losing her felt like losing a piece of their own past. In 2003, the film Anger Management was released, the last movie she ever made. She played Judge Brenda Daniels, standing alongside Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson. The film was dedicated to her memory, a quiet tribute at the end of the credits that most people missed, but for those who noticed, it meant everything. It was the final bow of a woman who had given her all to the craft she loved. Lynn never married. She had no children. But she left behind something larger, generations of audiences who felt they knew her, who grew up learning from her presence, even when they didn't know her name. In interviews, she had once said she didn't need the titles that others chased: wife, mother, star. I have my work, she said. That's my life. In 2005, her longtime agent, Roseanne Gates, helped create the Lynn Thigpen and Bobo Lewis Foundation, a nonprofit supporting actors, writers, and directors. It was exactly the kind of legacy Lynn would have wanted, something that helped others find their voice. Back in her hometown of Joliet, Illinois, a new elementary school was named in her honor. Children walked through doors bearing her name, perhaps never knowing who she was, but growing up surrounded by the spirit of a woman who once stood exactly where they stood, dreaming of something more. Her story ended quietly, but her light never dimmed. When the cameras stopped rolling and the applause faded away, Lynn Thigpen remained in the echoes of her laughter, the weight of her words, and the warmth she gave to everyone she met. Time has a strange way of softening memories while sharpening meaning. Years after her passing, Lynn Thigpen's name may not headline Hollywood retrospectives, but her presence is everywhere in the voices she inspired, the stories she elevated, and the quiet dignity she brought to every frame. Her legacy begins where she left her heart in the world of education and the arts. The Lynn Thigpen and Bobo Lewis Foundation continues her mission, helping young actors, writers, and directors build careers with integrity and passion. The foundation's motto, "Helping artists find their light," feels almost like something she might have said herself. For a woman who spent her life illuminating others, it's the perfect tribute. Back home in Joliet, Illinois, her story came full circle. The city that once watched her leave for New York now honors her with the Lynn Thigpen Elementary School. Every morning, hundreds of children walk under her name etched in stone, unaware, perhaps, that the woman behind it once sat in classrooms just like theirs, wondering if her dreams were too big. In that small, everyday way, she continues to teach, not through words, but through legacy. In Hollywood, her peers never forgot her. Actors like James Avery, who worked alongside her on FM, called her a rare kind of strength, the kind that didn't need attention to be felt. Directors remembered her for her professionalism, her patience, and her ability to transform even the simplest line into something human. For audiences, her impact was just as deep. Adults remembered her as Mrs. Barrett, firm, unyielding, but honest, while children remembered her as the chief, a mentor wrapped in laughter and wisdom. To span generations that way is rare. Few actors ever managed to touch both the classroom and the living room, the stage and the heart. Lynn did it with ease. Her voice, perhaps more than anything, became her signature. Deep and commanding, it carried warmth without weakness. In an era when many women of color were typecast or silenced, Lynn used her voice as both shield and instrument, reminding America that authority could sound like compassion. Her artistry was never about fame. It was about presence, the act of showing up, doing the work, and leaving each project stronger than she found it. She brought honesty to an industry built on illusion, and in doing so, she became the kind of artist who doesn't just entertain, but endures. Even today, when fans revisit Carmen Sandiego, they hear her laughter echo between the lines. When they rewatch Lean on Me, they see her eyes sharp, yet full of empathy. Each performance is a lesson in restraint, truth, and grace. Lynn Thigpen's name might not sparkle on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but her light lives on in classrooms, in children's voices, in the memories of those who knew that greatness doesn't always need to shout. Some stars burn bright. Others, like Lynn, choose to glow quietly and never fade. In the years that followed her passing, something beautiful began to happen. People started remembering Lynn Thigpen not just for her roles, but for her impact. The nostalgia of the 1990 brought new life to her work. Reruns of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego appeared on streaming platforms, and grown adults found themselves smiling at the sight of the chief once again. For a generation that had once rushed home from school to watch her, seeing her face felt like finding a long-lost friend. Social media, decades after her death, gave voice to what audiences had always felt but rarely said, that Lynn Thigpen deserved far more recognition than she ever received. Fans posted clips, tributes, and memories, writing things like, "She taught us without preaching," or "She made us feel seen." Many credited her with shaping their love of learning or their understanding of strong, compassionate leadership. In academic circles, critics began re-evaluating her contribution to American television and theater. Writers noted how she broke quiet barriers, portraying authority, intellect, and empathy at a time when Black women were often confined to narrow stereotypes. She didn't shout for equality, she embodied it. Her presence on screen was itself a statement. Younger performers have since cited her as an influence, especially those who grew up seeing her as the chief. For many actresses of color in children's television and theater, Lynn became a blueprint, proof that one could lead with grace, humor, and depth all at once. She wasn't a symbol of power. She was power soft, steady, and undeniable. Her influence extended far beyond the screen. The nonprofit foundation in her name continues to nurture new generations of storytellers, people who might otherwise have never had a chance. Each grant, each scholarship, feels like her voice reaching out once more, saying, "You can do anything if you believe in it." Even in popular culture, her name surfaces in unexpected ways. Viewers rediscover her in films like Tootsie and The Warriors, marveling at how she could turn brief appearances into memorable moments. Her performance in Lean on Me has become the subject of essays and online discussions about nuance, how she turned a potential antagonist into a complex human portrait. The reevaluation of Lynn Thigpen's career has become, in itself, a reflection on Hollywood's history, on how often brilliance goes unrecognized until it's gone. She represents a truth many find painful but necessary, that art's deepest value isn't always rewarded in its time. And yet, through rediscovery and remembrance, Lynn's story continues to grow. Each year, new viewers stumble across her work, realizing they've known her all along through a voice, a smile, a moment that stayed in their memory long after the credits rolled. She may not have the golden statue or the star on the boulevard, but she has something rarer permanence in the hearts of those who remember. In the end, that's what legacy truly means. They may have forgotten her name in Hollywood, but not in the places that mattered most: in classrooms, in living rooms, and in the quiet corners of memory where real legends live forever. The stage is dark again now. The desk where the chief once stood is empty, and the voice that used to guide children through maps and mysteries has long gone quiet. But somehow, when you close your eyes, you can still hear her, that calm, confident tone that made you believe learning could be fun, that kindness could be powerful, that strength didn't always need to be loud. Lynn Thigpen's story is not one of tragedy, but of truth. She lived her life exactly as she wanted, devoted to her craft, grounded in purpose, and untouched by the vanity that so often consumes Hollywood. She may not have chased fame, but she earned something much greater: respect that endures. From a small-town teacher in Illinois to a Tony-winning actress on Broadway, from a soulful performer in Lean on Me to the beloved chief who defined a generation, Lynn Thigpen proved that the most extraordinary lives are often built on quiet choices. She didn't just act, she gave. Every performance carried her humanity. Every role felt like an act of service. Hollywood may not have crowned her with the titles she deserved, but her legacy found its own way home through every child she inspired, every student she encouraged, and every viewer who still remembers the sound of her laughter. Perhaps that's the most powerful kind of stardom, the kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out. So tonight, if you remember her as Mrs. Barrett, as the chief, or as the woman whose voice once filled your living room, take a moment to honor her. Leave a message below, share your memory, or simply whisper her name. Because remembering is how legends live forever. Do you think Hollywood ever gave her the respect she truly deserved? If this story moved you, help us keep her light alive for the ones who came before, and the ones still waiting to be seen. Some stars never fade. They just shine where fewer eyes can see.